Hunger strike enabled by Honey Buns. This is the Alligator News Roundup. Thanks for joining today, and the Surgery Recovery Center seems to be going well so far. Plus, city's church protester freed in effort to balance freedoms. Devout Christians in Nigeria turned to guns. And carjacking a Marine is a bad idea in Maryland. Also, here is a Gone Scientist update. Here we go.
Number 4. Blaze Media. Hunger strike or honey bun binge. ICE detention protest narrative full of lies.
Impassioned detainees at an ICE facility in New Jersey protested last week by staging a hunger strike. Delaney Hall in Newark is a privately operated detention center for some 400 illegal aliens held for deportation. Amid complaints of poor sanitation and medical neglect, the detainees had had enough. They showed their outrage by refusing to eat the food served, which they claimed was spoiled anyway. The fact that no evidence of spoiled food was presented is neither here nor there. What is important is that those who entered the USA illegally and were arrested by ICE were determined to remain here and not be returned to there. Meanwhile, a guy's got to eat. Fortunately, Delaney Hall offers a commissary featuring such healthy items as Snickers bars, Honey Buns, and hot Cheetos. Sales doubled in the week of the strike. Now, I know a hunger strike is a serious affair, but shifting one's diet from institutional fare, no doubt state inspected and approved, to junk food seems distinctly unserious. Where else in the world can you get a honey bun to tide you over while you hurl insults at guards? I haven't had a honey bun in years. This makes me a little hungry. Look, I know it's hard. Forcing people to comply with the rule of law is not for the faint of heart. To channel Benjamin Franklin, those who would give away their principles to show their kindness will soon have neither.
Number 3. Alpha News. Judge dismisses charges against anti-ICE agitator arrested after disrupting city's church Easter service.
City's church in St. Paul, Minnesota was the scene of a confrontational disruption on Easter Sunday this year when a group of anti-ICE protesters invaded the morning worship service. Led in part by former CNN left-wing, but I repeat myself, commentator Don Lemon, who just happened to be in the area that morning, looking for a way to praise Jesus on Resurrection Sunday, blowhorn in hand, some 39 protesters defied uniformed security and entered the sanctuary. The in-your-face dispute prevented parents from joining their children, who were no doubt terrified, down the hall in children's church. Video footage abounds, of course, this being the modern age. The district court judge, who thoroughly reviewed evidence the following morning, determined, after a few minutes' careful thought, that there was no probable cause that would justify prosecution for one Emily Heather Phillips of Wisconsin. She had been arrested in the melee after refusing a police officer's verbal order to stand down. No doubt the red-haired Ms. Phillips, who on Instagram goes by the handle RedWitch333, had also been cruising quiet suburbs the next state over, looking for a loving Christian congregation to join for fellowship and communion. The St. Paul attorney provided a little more insight into the decision to drop the charges. Irene Cow suggested the right to peaceably protest, which now somehow includes blowhorns, chanting, and obstructing someone else's church service on private property, with the freedom to worship. The invasion seemed to arise from opposition to one of the city's church pastors, who it was claimed was an ICE employee. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Doesn't really matter. If you have already determined your cause, any old justification will do. This, by the way, is the distinction between critical thinking and critical theory. Blurring that line is a death sentence for America. But I digress. One thing from the city's church contretemps that occurs to me is this. Prevented parents from joining their children seems to have been overlooked. If, through physical intimidation, I restrict you from moving to a location you desire to reach, doesn't that constitute something akin to kidnapping? Maybe it is only false imprisonment, which in some states is a misdemeanor rather than a felony. Either way, it appears there are legal grounds for something other than, never mind, I know in your heart you were sincere. Have a nice day. Meanwhile, here's your mugshot worth a few 100,000 more clicks. To be fair, I only raised the issue because an old episode of The FBI starring Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. included it in the script back in the day. Or maybe it was 77 Sunset Strip, whatever. But seriously, laws are spelled out for a reason. This system doesn't work if they are ignored. To quote an elected local government official who once dismissed an obvious city violation committed by a friend, "That's a law we just don't enforce here." The irony of an obviously lawless rebellion in a city named for the apostle who wrote, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers," ought not be lost on us. In an admonishment strangely apropos to our situation today, he followed a few sentences later with, "It is high time to awake out of sleep." I suppose he put it that way because "pull your head out" had not yet joined the vernacular.
Number 2. Persecution.org. Activists call for self-defense measures after Fulani militias kill 7 Christians in Nigeria.
In an ongoing attempt to ensure peace, tranquility, and a lawful ordered society, Nigerian militias stormed a barracks at 1 a.m. and shot dead 7 sleeping men who were allegedly part of an illegal mining operation. The Fulani militia, brandishing weapons, takes its role in standing up for truth and justice seriously. The fact that the victims were Christians in a predominantly Muslim nation has no bearing, nor does the history of widespread armed violence against churches across a country where private ownership of firearms is strictly forbidden. As for illegal mining, yes, the Vics were probably up to something illegal. The article does not indicate what type of mining, nor what forces had persuaded laws against it. I smell money at work here someplace, but I'm admittedly a cynic on such things. Government troops stationed nearby and charged with protecting the populace from groups like the Fulani militia, Boko Haram, and the Islamic State West Africa province leaped into action, as well they should, as those organizations are noted for wantonly burning both churches and mosques alike. Leaped into action, however, may overstate the case. The 1 a.m. attack site was visited 8 hours later by first responders who said, "Yep, looks like another bloodbath." Interestingly, the Christian minister who led the burial service put into words what many Americans believe but often have trouble verbalizing clearly. "We preach peace, but peace does not mean surrender to slaughter," he said. "The right to life is sacred, and protecting that life is not a crime." If you slap a man for being a Christian, that's one thing. If you turn a pistol on him, that may be something else entirely.
Number 1. Internewscast.com. Marine veteran Jaco Border successfully defends against armed carjacking attempt by 4 masked teens in Maryland.
In a classic failure to read the room, 4 teenaged men sought to steal a pickup truck from a Maryland man outside his home in broad daylight. What they had on their side was a pistol. Showing the gun probably was a poor choice. Former Marine Jaco Borda simply took the gun away and threw the tough guy to the ground. Borda's brother emerged from the house and wrestled down a second one. The other 2, passionate one for all and all for one types, fled on foot. Police arrived and arrested all 4 assailants. Choose your audience. Someone has called events like this a catastrophic failure of the victim selection process. And an update on the gone scientists. This story has fallen off the front pages, but I sincerely hope someone somewhere continues to investigate. Where is Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. when you really need him? The remains of Melissa Casillas, the Los Alamos National Laboratory administrative assistant who disappeared while hiking a year ago, were discovered in Carson National Forest, New Mexico. Casillas' disappearance has been linked to that of other Americans who had access to highly restricted documents related to national security, nuclear developments, rocket technology, and so forth. To date, I have seen no further word on the others. Unlike some reporting on this most recent find, this does not bring to closure the matter of her death. She died for some reason, maybe self-inflicted, maybe not. The others disappeared or died for other reasons. I would really like to know what those reasons might include and who might be behind them. And thanks for joining the Alligator News Roundup for Friday, June 12, 2026. I'm happy to report that recovery from last week's hip surgery proceeds apace and has not yet riled domestic disturbance in a household where the guy who is normally away for hours each day has now suddenly been forced indoors with Mrs. Alligator. She is dutiful, gracious, and long-suffering, and shows it. And some astute readers will note it was exactly 4 years ago today that I saw a doctor who first uttered the word leukemia in my presence. Time marches on. Have a good weekend.
We are so glad you chose to start your weekend with us. Stay tuned for future episodes where we will continue to bring you right-thinking commentary on the events of this world.